May 1925. Paris. A private dining room at the Hotel de Crillon.
One of the most expensive addresses in the world, 2 blocks from the Place de la Concorde.
6 of France's most powerful scrap metal dealers have been summoned by a government official. Named Deputy Director General Lustig, a man with a leather briefcase.
A Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs letterhead, and a proposal so audacious. It should have ended with laughter. It doesn't end with laughter.
It ends with one of the 6 men handing over 70,000 francs in cash.
Inside a suitcase for the right to demolish and sell for scrap.
One of the most recognizable structures in the history of human civilization. The Eiffel Tower.
He sold the Eiffel Tower, and then, when it worked, he came back and sold it again. This is the story of Victor Lustig.
Carried 17 known aliases and spent 40 years outwitting police forces.
On 2 continents. By the end of this story, you won't just understand how he did it. You'll understand why it worked. And that part is the most unsettling part of all.
The Eiffel Tower in 1925 was, by most accounts, an embarrassment. That fact is essential to understanding everything that follows.
Gustav Eiffel built it in 1889 as a temporary structure for the World's Fair.
A demonstration of what French engineering could do with iron and ambition.
The original plan called for it to be demolished in 1909. It was only saved because it turned out to be extraordinarily useful. As a radio transmission tower.
To deciding what to do with it permanently. By the mid-1920s, it had been standing for 36 years.
Without a coherent maintenance budget, and the Parisian press was running stories about the cost of keeping it from rusting into the Seine, the scrap value of the tower.
7,000 tons of puddled iron was estimated at the time to be in the range of several 100,000 francs. It was, on paper, a genuine asset, with a genuine disposal problem.
The French government had not sold it. But the rusors that they might were credible enough
to be reported in newspapers. That newspaper story was the seed.
And Victor Lustig was the kind of man who could grow a forest from a seed.
Who would be crazy enough to try to sell the Eiffel Tower? The answer, it turns out, is someone who had been practicing the art of the impossible
his entire life, and who understood, better than almost anyone before him,
that the most effective weapon a con artist has is not deception.
It is the Mark's own desperation to believe. Victor Lustig was born on January 4th, 1890, in Hostinec, Bohemia, a small town in what is now the Czech Republic. He was the son of the town's burgomaster, which gave him early access to the mechanics of official authority. How bureaucrats speak, how documents look.
How the weight of institutional language causes people to defer without thinking. He was educated, multilingual, and gifted, with an almost clinical ability to read people.
By his mid-20s, he was running card games on transatlantic ocean liners,
Separating wealthy passengers from hundreds of dollars per crossing. with a combination of controlled charm
and manufactured urgency. He had a scar on his left cheek.
from a knife fight, a detail he deployed strategically.
Explaining it differently to different marks, depending on what version of himself would be most useful.
War wound, dueling scar, accident. The scar was the same. The story changed as needed.
Lustig had one rule, which he reportedly articulated to other grifters in something he called his 10 Commandments of the Con.
The most important commandment: never try to convince anyone of anything. Instead, find what they already want to believe.
And simply confirm it. The mark does the work.
You just hold the door open. By 1925, Lustig was operating primarily in Europe and the United States, under more than a dozen aliases. He had been arrested twice and escaped consequences both times. Through a combination of bribery and his extraordinary ability to construct alternative versions of himself
that could not be connected to the crime. He was 45 years old. He was broke.
And he was sitting in his Paris hotel room, reading a newspaper article about the mounting cost of maintaining the Eiffel Tower. He put the newspaper down. He picked up the phone, and within 72 hours, he had sourced fake government stationery, forged official documents identifying himself as Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs,
and made contact with 6 of Paris's most prominent scrap metal dealers. Here's the mechanics of it.
because the mechanics are what make this story so remarkable. Lustig's pitch rested on 3 pillars
of psychological architecture. First, the secrecy.
Each dealer received an invitation to a private meeting, framed as a confidential government tender.
The secrecy was not presented as suspicious, it was presented as necessary to prevent public panic
And press speculation. The government, Lustig explained, needed to move quietly.
before the newspapers turned the demolition into a political circus. Secrecy, framed correctly, does not raise alarm bells.
It creates the feeling of being specially selected. Second, the setting. The Hotel de Crillon
Is where governments hold meetings. It is where ambassadors dine.
Hosting a government tender there was not extravagant. It was exactly appropriate.
Every detail of the environment confirmed the legitimacy of the meeting before a single word was spoken.
Third, and most crucially, the opportunity. The 6 dealers at that table were not naive men.
They were successful businessmen, experienced in the scrap market, financially sophisticated.
But they were sitting across from a stack of official documents and a man in a well-cut suit explaining that they had been personally selected from a list of vetted contractors to submit a sealed bid.
For a contract worth, conservatively, several 100,000 francs. The number was real. The math was real.
The only thing that wasn't real was the man presenting it. Each dealer was taken on a tour of the tower by Lustig.
And his associate, a man named Robert Arthur Tourbillot, also a con artist, also operating under a fake name.
The tour was conducted with official credentials, official documentation.
And the kind of unhurried, proprietorial confidence that signals to every instinct in the human brain. This person belongs here.
But here's where it gets complicated. Everything was ready. The meeting was done.
The bids had been submitted in sealed envelopes. Lustig had already identified his preferred mark.
a dealer named André Poisson, who had displayed throughout the process exactly the combination of ambition and social insecurity that Lustig had been trained since childhood to identify. Poisson wanted the contract not only for the money,
but for the status. A government contract of this scale would put him in a different category of businessman entirely.
There was one problem: Poisson's wife. Madame Poisson was, by multiple accounts, skeptical.
She did not trust Lustig. She told her husband as much.
and André Poisson, in a move that would define the rest of his year, explained her concerns to Lustig directly.
Lustig doesn't miss a beat. He leans in. He becomes, suddenly, confidential.
He explains, with the weary candor of a man tired of the compromises public service requires, that the
responsibilities of his position. A supplementary arrangement, he implies, is customary in these situations. He doesn't ask for a bribe. He simply describes the world as it is.
With the gentle pragmatism of a Caucasian woman who has made peace with it. Poisson is relieved.
Of course there's a bribe. This is France. This is how things work.
The bribe doesn't make the deal suspicious. It makes it real.
He hands over 70,000 francs. Cash. In a suitcase.
He receives, in return, a signed contract for the demolition and scrap rights to the Eiffel Tower.
Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs letterhead, and a very official-looking seal.
Lustig is on a train to Vienna within hours. He has the 70,000 francs and his leather briefcase.
He does not have the Eiffel Tower. Poisson realizes what has happened approximately 2 days later. He goes to the police. He explains that a man claiming to be a government official
sold him the Eiffel Tower. And here is the twist that nobody in that police precinct saw coming.
Poisson withdraws the complaint. Quietly. Completely.
because André Poisson, a successful businessman with a reputation, a social position, and a wife who already told him something was wrong,
cannot bring himself to file a report explaining that he paid 70,000 francs for the Eiffel Tower. The humiliation of public knowledge is worse than the loss of the money. He absorbs the hit. He tells no one. He goes home. Lustig reads the Paris newspapers from Vienna for 2 weeks.
No arrest warrant. No description circulated.
No report filed. He processes this information with the calm of a man
who had calculated exactly this outcome. And then he goes back to Paris and does it again. The second sale, several months later, targets a different dealer.
This one does go to the police, which is the reason we know about this at all.
But by the time the report is filed, Lustig is already on a ship to the United States, where an entirely different chapter of his career is waiting. The American years are, if anything, more audacious.
Lustig pivots from property fraud to one of the most technically sophisticated cons
of the 20th century, the Romanian box, a mahogany device he claimed could mechanically reproduce Federal Reserve notes with perfect accuracy. The box was real. The mechanism inside was a cleverly concealed sleeve that held 2 genuine $100 bills, which would slowly emerge over a 12-hour processing period,
creating the illusion that the machine was printing money. The box sold for between $10,000 and $30,000 per unit.
He sold multiple units. He also, in one of the more brazen moments in the history of American crime, sat across a table from Al Capone
and talked Capone out of $50,000 for an investment scheme.
Then returned the money when the deal fell through, building so much trust in the process.
That Capone gave him $5,000 as a consolation gift. Lustig had planned the return of the money from the beginning.
He was playing a longer game. Federal agents finally caught Victor Lustig in September 1935 in New York.
After a pursuit involving more than a decade of investigation, multiple blown operations, and one crucial informant, a woman named Billy May, a former associate who tipped off the Secret Service after a personal dispute.
Lustig had been operating a massive counterfeit currency ring, distributing fake bills across 12 American cities.
At the time of his arrest, investigators estimated his operation had produced nearly $134,000 in counterfeit notes. This was 1935 currency, with purchasing power roughly 20 times that today. He was sentenced to 20 years in Alcatraz. He served time in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary first, where, in a detail that could only belong to this man, he escaped by knotting bedsheets together and descending from a window, then spent a month and a half evading recapture, before federal agents caught him again in Pittsburgh. Victor Lustig died on March 11, 1947. At the United States Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. He was 57 years old. Official cause of death, pneumonia. On his death certificate, under occupation, the authorities wrote, apprentice salesman.
His real name, the one he was born with, had been so thoroughly buried under aliases and forged documents that investigators spent years after his death attempting to reconstruct.
A basic biographical timeline. Several elements of his early life remain disputed.
The precise number of crimes they committed across 2 continents over 4 decades has never been tallied with certainty. 3 separate law enforcement agencies, but French, American, and British laws, maintained active files on him simultaneously. The 70,000 francs André Poisson handed over in that suitcase have, obviously, never been returned. The suitcase itself appears in no known inventory. The forged Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs documents that Lustig used to conduct the sale are, as far as can be determined, lost. The Eiffel Tower still stands. It receives approximately 7 million visitors per year. No one who stands beneath it and looks up at those 7,000 tons of iron
is thinking about a South Asian man in a well-cut suit who once sat in a hotel dining room and sold it for scrap.